Erik Erlendsson, lightninginsider.com. He's a brick wall like Andre Vasilevsky. What's going on? How are you?
What's going on, buddy? How are you? Long time no talk.
I know. Where are you? You're in your travels.
We're in Northwest Ohio, near Toledo.
Nice. Northwest Ohio, the Erlendsson clan. Uh, Happy first day of free agency. Happy Canada Day to you and yours. Any surprise that we haven't really heard much from the Lightning so far?
Not really. Especially after some of the comments that Julian made the other day after the draft that they expect to be quiet, right? They had their big offseason last year, obviously not re-signing Steven Stamkos and trading for Gabe Gonzalez, the Connor Geeky, JJ Boeser moves. There was a lot of roster upheaval from last season. And you just mentioned they don't have a lot of spots necessarily to fill. Nick Perfect's, they're moving on from him, but you got Max Crozier, who we assume just steps right in. We'll see what training camp brings on that front. The interesting one with me here is what do they do with Gabe Gonzalez? Right, like he wasn't QO'd, so technically he'll be an unrestricted free agent when the market opens here in about 29 minutes. But you would have to think they didn't QO him because there may be a deal that's close. There's a lot of praise for Gage's game, and you're looking for scoring depth. He feels like he could provide that. He certainly showed that in the second half of last season and was one of their most consistent guys in that series against the Panthers. If he's not brought back, and it's even if you feel there's a deal that might be close for Gage, it's a little trepidation there. If he hits the market, so can they do it? Do they rely on the young players? I mean, look, not bringing back Luke Glendening because I think they feel that Jack Finley's ready to step up and give an opportunity, and he has something that they don't have a lot of among their forward groups, and that is a size at 6'6", 220 pounds, made his NHL debut last year. So I think whatever holes that they may have, I think they're looking to do figure out internally, and if they make any sort of a free agency move, it's I don't want to say minor, but it's think of the Tyler Motts and how late in the free agency Tyler Mott signed and those type of situations. I'm not expecting much necessarily today in what they might do. If we see something that might be down the line a little bit, just to maybe add a veteran presence.
So a little bit of a surprise here for NHL free agency. It looked like Brock Boeser was going to be on the move, and he's actually going back to Vancouver on a 7-year deal, 7.25 AAV. That's got to be one of the bigger surprises so far. We thought guys like Mitch Marner would be able to, would move on. I don't know if it's a big shock that the Florida guys are returning. We see that pretty much all the time where if you can take a little bit less, you'll be able to kind of, keep the band together if they want to do that. But I think Brock Boeser, that's a little bit of a surprise there. I thought he was going to look for a new home.
It felt that way, especially with the talks not having really taken place much during the season. And, but 40 goal scorers are hard to find. It's, guys who can put the puck in the back of the net like Boeser can. They're hard to come by, and Vancouver needs some scoring. And with all the drama that the Canucks had last year, what Elias Pettersson are you going to get? They need him to be the guy that they're paying all that money to. Yeah. Does he need a setup man? And maybe that's what they're thinking. And how would you like to be one of the big networks today who have a free agency free agent show up and there's nobody? Nikolai Ehlers might be the biggest name left on the free agent market because all the Florida guys resigned. Boeser's re-signing. Marner was a sign and trade. Like there's no big names really on this free agent list. And so how would you like to have to fill, a few hours of airtime with a show that's about nothing?
Yeah, no doubt. Maybe they'll just dip into the NBA pool because there's a lot of stuff going on there. I know a lot of people are looking at this now, all right, well, these guys all took less to stay with the Florida Panthers. And some people are saying, well, why didn't Stamkos take less, right? It kind of sucks that the cap is not flat right now because of, you tend to think, wow, if the cap was raising in the last couple of years, could the Lightning have kept a Killorn? Could they have kept a Palat? Could they have kept Gord the first time? What do you say to those people that mention Stamkos and mention some of those guys that they weren't able to keep because it was such a flat cap during the 2021, 22, 23 season?
Well, I think there would have been a better chance to keep some of those guys if the cap rose the way it's going to over the next 3 seasons, right? And that's why Florida's able to do what Tampa Bay couldn't, and that is
Right.
keep, the Bennett's, the Ekblads, and keep a Marchand. I mean, look, nobody expects Marchand to play to 43, right? Like, he signed a 6-year deal, but nobody expects that to happen. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing with the Ford contract. So you extend those contracts out a little bit and lower the cap hits. And look, Steven Stamkos was willing to take less. He knew if he was going to stay, he wasn't going to get $8 million per year here. So he was willing to take less. I just don't know how low that number was, and if the Lightning even wanted to keep him. I mean, you hear, right about this time last year on some of the comments that came out of both Steven Stamkos' camp and the Lightning's camp when they parted ways, that did the Lightning even want him, right? So how low was the number to be able to keep him, and did the Lightning just feel they were in a situation where they just wanted to move on from him? So, but the other guys, yeah, I think if the cap had been going up like it is now, I think Andre Palat will still be here. Maybe Alex Killorn. Some other guys maybe not, but those are the two that stick with me that felt like they were a big piece of the puzzle that they had to let go of because the cap constraints were there and they were real. And the Lightning, I mean, you have to praise Julian and his staff for the job that they did during a flat cap era for trying to
Right.
maintain as much as they could, and then also retooling on the fly. I mean, the Brandon Hagel trade is going to go down as one of the best trades I think in Lightning history. Look at the type
Mm-hmm.
of player that Brandon Hagel has turned into. Nick Paul has proved to be a pretty versatile guy, so he's done a pretty good job of retooling on the fly. Jake Gensel for sure as well. But yeah, it hurts. It hurts when you have guys that helped you win championships that want to stay, that you want to keep, but you just can't do it because of the cap.
Double E, we were wondering last week leading up to the draft or even on the night of the draft whether we would see some movement when it came to a guy like Isaac Howard. We've had this discussion the last couple of months. We were all gung-ho. We were excited that it looked like he was going to be a part of the team down the stretch. And then we find during the exit interviews that it's not going to happen. He's not going to be with this team. He's not going to play with the Bolts, and that they'll look to move him. And if they don't move him, they'll end up getting that compensatory second-round pick. And we hear after when Julian Breezewell spoke to the media that there's been a lot of conversations, but nothing concrete, like the bricks behind you, nothing solidified. What do you make of this entire process of Isaac Howard not being moved and the difficulty trading him? And do you think we could see something here in the next couple of days as free agency unfolds a little bit more?
I think right now, if it didn't happen at the draft, it's going to take a little bit into free agency because teams are going to want to try and bring in players that they don't have to give
Right.
up something for other than contracts, right? You don't want to have to add assets, and give up assets at the same time. So I think once the dust settles after a couple of days of free agency and teams kind of figure out where they're at, I think those discussions will heat up again and take place again. That's just sort of the nature of how things move at this time of the year. Now if it's not done by the end of July, then now we're starting to worry because classes will start up again and
Right.
he might end up going back to school. And look, he can leave school at any time. You don't have to, you're not 100% committed to school if you end up going back to college. But if it's not done by the end of this month, then you start to wonder, will it get done? Because I don't think teams are going to be willing to give up assets at that point if he's going back to school and going to play. Then they know come next August they can sign him, and all the Lightning are going to get is that compensatory second round pick. But the fact that there were plenty of discussions, and Julian was about as open as you're going to get out of Julian, right? Talking about, the teams that were a match, we didn't like the offers, and then teams that he didn't want to play for had the right offers, right? Like, so at least those discussions are taking place, and I think that's a positive sign in terms of will they be able to bring in assets for an Isaac Howard, and maybe all of that sets up what Lightning do in phrase, right? And maybe that's why they plan on being quiet because they have an idea of who they might be able to bring in, assuming it's roster players and not just future capital. So maybe that's a positive sign that they know what they might be able to get in return if they can move Howard here in the next coming weeks.
What position do you think they'd focus on if they're going to bring in a guy? Because they have to bring in somebody. Like, I know they have holes that they got to fill, but I mean, the depth has to get better with this team, and I don't know if running it back with the same group is going to make them that much better and get them that much closer to Florida, right? I mean, Florida traded away a guy like Jonathan Huberdeau for Matthew Tkachuk, and I know the Lightning what they did last year, but I don't know, man. I have a hard time believing that, even if they run it back again, they think automatically things are going to be different because you look at a guy like McDonough, he's a year older. He played 82 games last year. I don't know if he's going to do that again this year, right? What's your bottom six look like? How is it going to be able to go up against, their bottom six? And they're bringing all 12 forwards back. So what do you make of them? And as far as needing to make a move, what spot would you focus on? And how can they close the gap to the Panthers?
Well, let's remember Oliver Bjorkstrand. You're going to get a full year of Oliver Bjorkstrand. You did not see him in the playoffs, assuming he comes back from this injury, which sounded like a pretty scary injury to the leg. Assuming he comes back healthy, you're going to get a full year of him, and hopefully, you get to the playoffs and you can kind of see, because he's a clutch scorer. He's proven that in his career when it comes to the postseason. So let's add that in the equation. That's basically a new player because we only saw him for 20 games and then didn't see him in the postseason. So that's a guy that helps out the middle six. But other than that, I think that's an area where they look to, right? You move on from Glendening. Do you try and bring in a guy who's a face-off type of guy? I mean, you look at the face-offs, and Glendening was 57%. Everybody else was around 50 to 51. You kind of need somebody who can be a little bit of a consistent guy you can throw out there late in games to win you those key face-offs or win you key face-offs on the PK. So those are areas that I would look at. I still wonder about their defensive depth. I said it before. I like the top four: McDonough, Chernak, Hedman, and assuming Boeser stays on that right side. Can Emil Lilleberg take another step in his progression? To become a guy that you can rely on for 15 to 20 minutes a night. Is Crozier going to be the guy that plays next to him? Where does Darren Radish fit in? So I do have some questions still about their overall depth on defense. Do you try and bring in a veteran? They didn't last year when we thought that for sure that was an area that they were going to address, especially at the trade deadline. But if you're looking at additions via free agency, those are probably the areas that I would look towards as potential adds. But again, I don't expect much.
Joel Armia and it looks like Corey Perry heading to the LA Kings. That's interesting. Corey Perry. So you know what's going to happen. The Kings are going to the Stanley Cup final next year, and then they're going to lose. Yeah, it's crazy. When you look at this Tampa Bay Lightning team, as you just mentioned on the defensive side, do you think they try to go 12-6 more next year? I know they were so 11-7 happy. And if you say Crozier's picking up per Perbix, like I understand that aspect of it, but then you wonder too, are you really doing your forwards a disservice? And I know it helps you with the matchups. It's something that you can always go to. I think it's better utilized on the road when you know that you don't have that last change. But I just wonder if the guys maybe wore down a little bit because they played it so much during the regular season last year. And, does it hurt your decor, right? Does it hurt your decor? And I know it's good to be versatile. It's good to be able to play with a bunch of different guys, but we can't on one hand say like, oh, the familiarity is good. And that consistency, knowing who you're going out with is, that's part of the reason why Chernak has played so well, playing with a guy like McDonough, that consistency, and then have situations where you're mixing and matching all the time on defense. So I just wonder if this is something that you think they're going to continue to do at a high clip in the 2025 season, or do you think they go back to maybe a little bit more of a traditional 12-6 the majority of the year?
Well, you bring up an interesting point with taxing the forwards, because you're right. I mean, some of those guys were playing some heavy minutes down the stretch, right, when they were going 7-11 for a good portion of the second half of the year after Boeser came back in particular, because they went 12-6 quite a bit to start the year, right? Darren Radish was actually the guy that was out quite a bit, and then they would rotate, and Perbix would sit out, Lilleberg would sit out, so they kind of went through that little bit of rotation.
And then Boeser got hurt,
Yeah, and then Boeser missed almost 3 months of time. But when they did go 7-11, it certainly has its advantages. But one of the disadvantages is, there you go. Somebody just told us Gabe Gonzalez the deal was close and it's done 2 by 1.2. So
there you go.
That's a positive sign. So that's good. You got it done 15 minutes before free agency started. So no threat.
Yeah.
So that's good. That's going to help. That's going to help their middle depth if he can continue to be the player he was in the second half of last year, and he continued that in the playoffs. That's probably one of their most consistent forwards. So there's a guy that you can put between second and third line, some versatility on the wing, and show that he could play with Cooch and point it a couple of times throughout the year as well. So that's a good signing there. Good job on Julian getting that contract done with Gage. But back to the 7-11 situation. Yeah, I mean, look, when Anthony Cirelli's having to play 25 minutes and Hagel's
Yep.
playing 25 minutes, Kucherov is playing 25. I mean, that's a lot for forwards. You know, those are heavy minutes, and and you wonder, especially with the style of play that the Panthers have, did that lead to being able to wear those guys down even more,
Yep.
right? Because you get punished in the playoffs. We saw it in the way that the Panthers played throughout the entire playoffs. That was part of the strategy, just punish, whether it's legal or illegal, however you want to look at it. But that's what they try to do. And that's why I was asking the questions at the end of the season there. Do you almost have to build your team just to get out of your division?
Right.
Now, that wasn't necessarily directed at just the Panthers. It just happens to be the Panthers that are for like top 2 years. But you almost have to build your team that way, right? To just get out of your division. And the division's getting deeper. So I guess let's see what the forwards look like when we get to training camp. What does the depth look like amongst our forward group when we get there? And I think that determines whether or not they go 7-11 more consistently or as consistently as they did last year, or if they go, to a more 12-6 style. Because I think every year, every team takes on its own different personality, right? And so next year's team, while it might look similar with a lot of players, will it have the same personality? I think that will be determined, within the first month of the season, and I think that'll give them a blueprint of what they feel their team will look like moving forward.
2-year deal for Gabe Gonzalez, 1.2 million AAV. Lightning just announced it themselves as well, so that's a really good thing to be able to get him in. And you mentioned it too, E. And here, I'm going to put up the graphic for everybody so they can see. It's always nice when you get your own graphic, and a good graphic too. Hold on, let me see. There we go. Look at there. Look. Oh, wait, let me put it here. There we go. Gabe Gonzalez, 2-year contract with an AAV of 1.2 million. Let's talk a little bit more about him, if we can, E, as far as the growth that we saw from him. I feel like he was a guy that went down to Syracuse, worked on his craft, and just really just showed that he's not just a playmaker, but he can put the puck in the back of the net. Saw him playing on the top line a little bit too, before he settled in. He's going to be a middle six forward for this team, but it just seemed like you love this story. You love a guy that's been in the system. We saw him a ton in development camp over the years, and we've seen him in training camp, and he was always one of the guys that he made it a little bit farther every season. But to be able to see a guy like that really play his best hockey down the stretch and not look out of place to get rewarded, I think it's a good deal on both sides.
I agree. He is. You love these development stories. So when players and specifically teams talk about development paths, everyone is different. There's no doubt. Some guys accelerate faster. Some guys take a little bit longer. He was an overage guy when he was drafted, so he was already 19 when he was drafted. So he was a little bit 1 year further along the prospect list, if you will, in terms of what they wanted to do with him. But yeah, it's you look back, even go back to the Tyler Johnsons, the Andre Palats, that era of prospects the Lightning developed, right? Johnson was an undrafted free agent. Palat was a 7th-round draft pick. But they put him into the system. They get him into the program, the off-season program. They build their skating. They get a little bit better here. You can build on what they already have in terms of their back pocket and their skill set and everything. And then you give them a taste here, you let them build. Give them more minutes in the AHL, you let them build. You give them a couple of games at the NHL level like they did 2 years ago, and you send them back, and this is what we need you to work on. And then they have to work on it. And this year in particular, I think, was the best example of what it means to develop. Because, there was a good chance he might have made the team out of camp. He was injured late. They decided to send him back and let him play some time. And then he comes up and he plays a couple of weeks. Okay, you're getting there, but you're not quite there.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he came up that last time, it clicked for him. And you never know when it's going to click for players. And with Gage, it clicked. And I tell you what, I had plenty of conversations with him over the last course of the last month and a half of the season, and you can see the light bulbs. Like you can see just in the conversations with him and what he sees different now than maybe he did his first call up, and then that first call up compared to his first year pro. Like you just see everything that the players start to understand. And when I heard him, excuse me, in a conversation I had, talk about he wanted to get a deal done quick because he wanted to go spend time with Kucherov. Mm-hmm. He wanted in on the Kucherov camp.
Right.
And I don't know if he was there when Cooch started this because we know, 1 week after the season was over.
Yep. Stammer was there.
So, you start to see how now he sees the game a little bit differently. And he wants to understand how Kucherov, and look, nobody sees the game like Nikita Kucherov, but as a young player, you have the opportunity to tap into that and work with that and see the work ethic. And now hopefully he builds on that and he gets, so it's a wonderful story of a development program where a player isn't rushed because rushing players can ruin their careers. You season them, you let them work at it, you let them understand what it means to be a pro, and then give them a taste of it and understand, okay, you want more of this? We'll work on this and we'll see if you're ready for more of it. And it's a great story. And he is the type of guy that can move around first, second, third line. Certainly he showed he can make plays like a top six guy, but also that he can, kind of grind if he has to. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he can grind in a third line role if you need him there for a little bit. But I think he's better suited in, a middle six type of role, more on the top tier of that middle six, because he can be a playmaker. And you can never have enough of those guys in your roster, and maybe that helps solve some of what I still think might be some depth issues up front.
Yeah, I look at this, the way he's played. A couple things. One, he plays bigger than the guy that you see walking around in the locker room. Like he doesn't look like a big guy at all, and he plays bigger than that. And I'm with you. Just talking to him, just as a human being, he's just more comfortable. Even just like not worrying about saying the right things all the time, right? He doesn't have to always give like the standard like cliche answer. He can just kind of talk, and he's just like, yeah, you just the comfort level, you can just see it. Not everybody's as comfortable as JJ Moser, but I mean, it's just the way it goes because he can talk the ear off of Brad Smokey, that guy. All right, what's the rest of the summer looking like for you, buddy?
Hey, we'll be back in town here after the weekend. I know I'm missing development camp and everything like that as we're out of town. But look, before you know it, training camp's here. You're going to start to see players trickle in at the beginning of August as school starts with some of the guys that have some kids and get them into school. So I'll be hanging around. I've got a couple of concerts on my schedule to kind of close out the summer as we get close to camp. But I tell you, the summer goes fast, doesn't it? It's before you know it, we're going to be talking about rookie camp and everything else, and we'll be excited for another season. So it'll be here in the blink of an eye.
LightningInsider.com. We still got that promo code up?
Absolutely. Always there.
Promo code JNZ. Get $10 off, not just this season, but every recurring season after that. And yeah, man, it'll be here. It's July 1st, and it'll be here before you know it. Double E, thanks, man. I appreciate all your time, and give my love to the fam. Enjoy the rest of your time off, and before you know it, we'll be back up in the press box at Emily Arena. Thanks, pal.
Anytime, man. Talk to you soon, Jay. Happy 4th.
Thanks, pal. You too.